So call outs is like a very touchy subject for people. It's probably the policy that most school owners have rewritten like hundreds of times at this point. Um, Most directors, when I speak to them, can name me the policy of like, oh, when someone calls out, we have a whole system, right? When they call out once, they lose this point. When they call out a second time, then we have a conversation with them. When they call out a third time, then we have this. If they come late, then this happens. Like everyone knows like the whole Tetris game, but people are still calling out all the time. And it's costing you a lot of money. And so here's a question, okay? If a teacher calls out tomorrow, do you know what that costs your school? Not roughly, not in theory. Like, do you know the actual number of what every call out costs you? Most schools do not know this number. And that's really the first problem when it comes to call outs. Okay. Because here's what unfortunately has been normalized as a normal day. This is why I wrote my book, This Can't Be Normal, because we have normalized days where teachers call out. You have to reshuffle staff. Somebody has to stay late. Ratios stretch, admin has to step in, directors have to step in. I've spoken to owners who are covering ratios. And what happens is that it happens so often that you just normalize it. It feels like it's just a normal day. And that's why it's so dangerous, because it's actually not a normal day. My team and I created a call out cost calculator. And we created a call out cost calculator because when you understand the number, like your hourly rate, extra hours covered, overtime, how often this happens, and you multiply that out, the number you get is what this one pattern of call outs is costing you. You need to understand the actual number of how much this is hurting the company. Now, there is a false belief around call outs, because every time I speak to people, they're like, no, we have a policy. I'm like, no. You have a situational, circumstantial concept. So you have a policy, let's say, that says, okay, if you call out once, you get a reminder. If you call out twice, we have a conversation with you about the impact that your call out's having. If you call out 3 times, then we give you a write-up. If you call out 4 times, then we sit down and we have, a performance plan. If you call out 5 times, then we have this thing. If you call out the 6th time, then we fire you. And I'm like, okay, right? Or someone has like a different version of that where they're like, no, if they call out once, then they like, it's this point. And if they call out a second time, then there's like 3 points or 2 points or something. They have a whole point system. I'm like, okay, so how many times do I get to call out before I get fired? And they're like, well, it depends, because like if you call out the 3rd time, then it's double amount of points. I'm like, okay, so people who are running the call out system needs to be mathematicians, right? Because they need to make sure they understand the formula of like how many points and what the system is and the whole situation around that. So she's like, no, it's not so complicated. We have this thing. I'm like, okay, so if I call out 5 times, then I get fired. Okay. Now, what happens if you're short-staffed? So you're short-staffed now, and I just called out the 5th time. Are you going to fire me? She's like, no, well, we can't fire you because we're short-staffed. I'm like, okay, so then you don't have a policy. Because if your system does not hold under pressure, you do not have an actual system. You don't have infrastructure. You have situational, circumstantial, in the mood, when we can, leadership. So all your systems work in perfect conditions. Nobody needs systems for perfect conditions. You need infrastructure for when pressure enters the building. And guess what? Working in childcare, there's pressure all day long. Come pull up a seat. Let me show you Exhibit A. Okay? So if you don't have an actual infrastructure around callouts, what is your standard for callouts? Who owns it? What is the rhythm? What is the response? You don't have that, because you can't fire the person if they called out 5 times if you're short-staffed. So you don't have a real system. And I'm not saying you have to fire people. I'm actually very against firing people. We need better tools. I did a whole write-up on that last week, where leaders do not have tools. They have bribes and threats. I'm going to write you up. I'm going to give you a performance plan. Now I'm going to fire you. Guys, we need better tools. Like these cannot be the only tools in your toolbox, right? Because what happens is that when you are already short-staffed and now you can't follow through with the consequence, which is firing that person, which is what you said, you delay the consequence, you make an exception, you handle it later, and now your system isn't a system. It's conditional. So people think like, oh, I have a call out problem, or this is just the industry. I'm like, no, 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 no. You don't have infrastructure because all your systems depend on how hard your day is or how easy the day is or whatever it is, right? So I'll give you an example, right? Like, let's say you have the good teacher exception, right? She has frequent call outs, but she's really strong in the classroom, and the parents love her, so you keep her. So the result is your infrastructure erodes and more call outs follow that. Okay. You have another situation where the director gets pulled in. Now they're covering classrooms. So they're not doing follow-ups on one-on-ones. They're not doing gratitude. They're not doing classroom observations. They're not able to run the tours. So now you have 7 tours that didn't convert, not because she doesn't know how to convert tours, but because she's actually in the classroom. So she can't convert tours. Right. So you're not recognizing the compounding costs of your call outs. Okay. Overtime bleed. This is a whole other angle, right? You give these small concessions daily and you don't realize they're small concessions because it's not one big giant cost. It's 30 small decisions compounded that end up costing the school thousands and thousands of dollars. And schools are losing money because their systems break under pressure. They are not pressure tested. This is what we do in Schools of Excellence. My team and I put together something called the call out solution. And it is an entire breakdown of how to actually understand what callouts are costing you. We have a callout cost calculator and we have a callout standard brief. How to actually create infrastructure around callouts. What do you want your standard of callouts to be? Who owns it? Who is responsible for making sure that that callout standard happens every single time? Whether they're in the mood or not, I call it mood proof, whether they feel like it, whether it's a snow day, whether 4 people are called out sick with the flu or COVID or bronchitis, doesn't matter. The system holds under pressure. If your systems do not hold under pressure, you do not have a system. If your systems only worked when you're fully staffed, you don't have infrastructure. You have prayers and wishes and dreams. Hi, that doesn't work. We don't want vibes. We want actual infrastructure. Okay, a real standard is not after 5 call-outs, I fire you. A real standard is a pre-decided response that holds even when you're short-staffed. You need to pre-decide in advance. What are your responses to call-outs, even when you're short-staffed, even when it's a snow day, even when licensing walked in, even when 3 parents this, even when you're going through a rebranding, even when you're going through a software migration, even fill in the blank into all your evens. The standard still holds. Who owns coverage? What happens immediately? What is immediately, right? I spoke to someone, they're like, well, we talked to them. I'm like, do you talk to them 30 minutes after they came late? Do you talk to them by lunch? Do you talk to them by their break? Do you talk to them at the end of the day? She's like, no, we talk to them immediately. I'm like, what is immediately? What if you need to go to the bathroom right then? Then you're not talking to them immediately. She's like, I talk to them at the first available option. I'm like, okay, but what if the first available option is 4 o'clock? Or what if the first available option isn't until tomorrow morning? What is the first available option? Right? But saying that the first available option is when you talk to the person about your call out is not actually a system, because every single day your first available option is a different time. And so your teachers learn very quickly how to gamify the system, not because they're malicious, but because that's what the system rewards. So you actually need to explain and put it down. When you call out, we speak to you during your lunch break, which means your lunch break is now going to be about a conversation around your call out, right? So then people are like, I can't do that legally. I'm like, okay, so then don't make that the standard. When do you want to have the conversation with the person? That is part of the standard. Who has that conversation? The director. I'm like, what if the director's not there that day? Well, then the assistant director. I'm like, okay, does the assistant director know how to have those conversations? Is she actually going to have the conversation? She's going to be like, well, I really don't want to have the conversation. So tomorrow the director's coming back, so she'll just have the conversation. Okay, well, now she just broke the standard, because if the standard is that the teacher has to be spoken to on the same day, that means whoever's leading that building needs to have training and capacity to have the conversation on the same day. Or that's not the standard. The standard is that the director has the conversation. So if the director's not there that day, then the director has to call in. What if the director's on vacation? Are you going to make her call in on her vacation? Right? So what I'm doing here in real time is I'm doing something that nobody does. It's called pressure testing your infrastructure. That is what this is called. It's called pressure testing infrastructure. And I am walking through all of the loopholes in your system that you just figure out on the fly. But when you figure things out on the fly or what you're feeling authentically in the mood of, your systems break. You need pre-decided responses to what happens. You already know all the scenarios. Run through them and actually create infrastructure around that. Right? So it's the things that you have to recognize is that you don't enforce your policy every single time. You only do it when you can afford to, which means you only do things when the cost isn't too high. And so what happens is your people learn, I only do things also when the cost isn't too high, which means the moment something gets uncomfortable, sayonara, I'm out of here. That was too difficult. No, thank you. Don't want that. So what you're looking at as an owner is we need to understand what are callouts actually costing you and where is your callout system breaking now. We need to understand where are all the breakage points, right? This is what I put together in the callout solution. I have a training on how to help you deconstruct where is your callout system breaking under pressure right now. Where do you have your system already, right? Because most people that I speak to have some version of a callout system. Like, great. Now run it through this filter. Where is your call out system breaking? Where is it still relying on you, right? Where it's like, no, everyone handles everything up until this point. Okay, so then you don't really have a system, which means because if it breaks up until that point and then you still have to step in, that means you're still the infrastructure. You're still the system, right? You're still the system. That's the bottom line because it works until here. Okay, you can't have systems that work until here. You need a system that doesn't break under pressure, which means your systems have to be pressure tested against the realities of your school, not your dream fantasy unicorn rainbow Disneyland versions of your school and what you would ideally love to see. No. I want to know the messy, ugly reality situation on the ground. And we create standards based on that, right? Hey, Beth, good morning. I'm so glad that's relative for you right now, right? You can write over here, call out solution, and I'll send you more information on that. And so my team and I were looking, we're like, okay, thousands of schools deal with call outs, latenesses, people coming just 2 minutes late or whatever it is, right? And I'm like, no, this is costing you, right? I had a conversation, and this is in the breakdown of the training that we have over here, where I was coaching an owner, and she was like, okay, so if they need to call out, then they have to call us 2 hours before their shift. I was like, okay, so if someone's shift starts at 7, that means you want them to call at 5 o'clock in the morning. Who owns that? Who's answering calls at 5 a.m.? So she's like, oh, no one answers calls at 5 a.m. So I'm like, okay, so then that's not the standard. The standard is not you have to call out 2 hours before your shift, because if someone's shift starts at 7, it breaks. So we have to actually create a standard that works with the reality of your school if you want people to follow your standards, right? If your standards are this concept where it's like, yeah, well, ideally everyone calls 2 hours before. I'm like, what does ideally mean? Who the hell is answering a call at 5 o'clock in the morning? So we changed it, right? And then she was like, okay, so they have to call, I think she said an hour before. I was like, okay, so if they call 45 minutes before their shift, are you going to give them a consequence if they called 45 minutes before? She's like, no, if they called 45 minutes before, like, I'm just glad that they called. I'm like, so then you don't have a standard because you're still making concessions. What is the breaking point? Can they call 30 minutes before and you'll still be okay that they called you 30 minutes before because you're just glad that they called? Can they call 40 seconds before their shift? Like, if my shift starts at 7, can I call you at 6:59? And if I called at 6:59, are you just glad that I called? Or is there going to be a consequence for me not doing what the policy is? This is what it means to pressure test your standards. You have to pressure test it. You have to pressure test it. Shalene, I'm so glad you wrote this. A lot of sicknesses going around is not an excuse for breaking the standard. Your standard has to work under pressure. So if you live in a city that has cold weather, aka 80% of the world, that means that you need to have a standard that works during vomit season, during flu season, during I don't feel well season, during my headache season, during my, oh my God, there's a stomach bug going around the school season. If your standards break when people are sick, you don't have a standard. You have a hope and a prayer and a wish. That means that owners can never fully step out during flu season or during cough season or during stomach season. You need a standard that doesn't break under pressure. That is what it means to actually build infrastructure. And here's the thing. Most people have never done this because it takes time to pressure test systems. Most people want plug and play systems. Tell me what your call out thing is. Tell me. I'm like, what does that mean? I can't tell you what my thing is. I live in a place that never has snow. I don't need to have a call out standard that also reflects snow days. We don't have snow days here, right? Like, what are the realities of the place that you live in? What are the realities of what goes on there? And are you building infrastructure that reflects reality? And then do you have a rhythm that consistently reassesses reality? Because here's another thing. Welcome to living in the real world. Reality shifts. You know when reality shifts? When disruptive forces come in, when new legislation gets passed, when new laws happen, when wage increases, when there's a new governor, when there's a new president, when there's a new mayor, when there's a new councilman, when there's a new thing. All of a sudden, all the things that you create, it's like, well, man, that doesn't work anymore. Oh, crap. Now we got to go recreate it. Yes, welcome to being alive, right? It's like a parent who thinks like, well, we already created the process. I'm like, yes, you created a morning routine for when your kids were 5, 3, and 1. Now your kids are 10, 8, and 7. Guess what? You need a new morning routine because your kids are in a new reality, okay? Anyone who's been a parent understands this, right? This concept of thinking that you should never have to revisit infrastructure and you should never have to revisit what's going on is a constant desperation for just wanting relief and not actually understanding what it takes to build infrastructure. This is why you need rhythms of return. This is why I wrote my book, This Can't Be Normal, because people create success and then it feels like survival. They feel like they are suffocating under these decisions, and they are, because the landscape keeps shifting, but they don't know how to keep updating it without collapsing and falling apart. And so they resort to threats and bribes. Parenting versions of threats and bribes in schools are, I'm going to write you up. I'm going to teach you again. I'm going to process it again. I'm going to model it for you again. I'm going to come into your classroom. I'm going to role play it. I'm going to show you it. I'm going to this. I'm going to that. And then after I show you that 70 times, now I'm going to write you up. Now I'm going to do a performance improvement plan. Now I'm going to report you to HR. And now, sayonara, you're fired. I'm like, why? Can we build different infrastructure? Can we build real systems that reflect reality? Can we actually build infrastructure? Yes, it's called the call-out solution. And for those of you that are on here still or came in at a certain point, what you're going to be seeing about schools of excellence in the next couple of weeks, and this is something that's been going on for several months, but now we're really planting our flag and declaring it, okay? We used to be a training and coaching company, and we did this for a decade. We are no longer a training and coaching company. We are an infrastructure installation company. We come into schools come and work with us to install infrastructure in their schools. No school needs any more training and coaching and teaching. If you have been around the block, you are vomiting coaching, training, and teaching. You need infrastructure. Systems pressure tested against reality. You need actual infrastructure. How does this actually work when I'm not here? How does this work on a snow day? How does this work when 4 people call out? How does this work if I'm away for 3 days? How does this work if my key teacher isn't here? How does this work if this person can't get out of bed? How does this work if this person calls? How does this work if we get a new president? How does this work if we get a new mayor? How does this work if there is a 20% wage increase in our tiny little town? How does this work if 3 franchises and private equity comes to town and wipes out all of this stuff? How does this work in the reality of consistent shifting landscapes? That is what infrastructure is. And we need to stop thinking that more training and more coaching and more explaining and more mentoring and more love and more hugs and more bonuses and more, oh my God, you're doing such a great job, and more positive motivation and more rah-rah and more. It's not. If it was, you wouldn't be here. We need infrastructure. Wishing you, I already went overtime over here. Wishing you an amazing Monday. And let me, if you want more content on this. Here's what I want you to sit with before we close out today's conversation. All right. Everything that we spoke about today comes down to one thing. You do not lose money in obvious ways. You lose them in patterns that you start to normalize. Missed follow-ups, inconsistent tours, I'll get to it later, right? And then there's one thing that almost every single school has, but very school leaders actually measure, and that is call-outs, because they're constant. A teacher calls out, you adjust coverage, you stretch ratios, you pay overtime, you move people around, you shuffle the schedule. And we do it so often that it's just become normalized for how the day runs. But it's not neutral. It's a leak. I worked with an owner doing over $2 million a year in revenue, who was losing $250,000 annually to callouts. $250,000 a year to callouts, and she didn't see it. She didn't see it. Only when we broke down the math and broke it down for her. And that is why I created the call out solution, because the call out solution is a focused system to expose and fix one of the most common money leaks in childcare operations. Inside the call out solution, you get the training, which is a direct breakdown of how call outs create hidden payroll loss and operational efficiency. You get the call out cost calculator, which is a calculator that we created to calculate exactly how much call outs are costing you every week, every month, and every year. And we also created the call out standard, which is a clear installable standard, edible for you to make sense for your school to reduce call outs, create accountability, and stabilize your staffing. You can go to the link in the show notes or go to schoolsofexcellence.com/callouts. Again, ratio efficiencies, disrupted classrooms that require more support, owners that feel pressure. These are things that you need to quantify the cost of. And we help you do that inside the call out solution, and also how to stop invisibly paying for this cost. Click the link in the show notes or go to schoolsofexcellence.com/callouts.